2010, the Cancel family lived a quiet, ordinary life inside their small New Jersey home. Carlos Cancel, 40 years old, and his wife Felicia, 41, were known by neighbors as warm, hard-working parents. They welcomed people into their home, cooked meals for relatives, and worked long hours to provide for their children. Their world was simple, peaceful, and built on routine. But behind their front door, a quiet tension had begun to grow. A tension centered around their daughter's boyfriend, Jose Sarmiento. He had started spending more and more time inside the house. Carlos and Felicia didn't like what they were seeing. They felt something was off about his behavior. They didn't trust his temper. They didn't like the influence he had on their daughter. The arguments began small. Disagreements about curfews, about how often he visited, and about schoolwork. Then the arguments grew louder, deeper, harder to ignore. By 2010, Carlos and Felicia were no longer hiding how they felt. They told their daughter directly. They didn't want Sarmiento in the house anymore, and that decision would become the spark for the tragedy that followed. Friends later told investigators that Sarmiento felt intensely rejected by the Cancels. He believed the parents were trying to control him, trying to break up his relationship, trying to push him out of their daughter's life. He complained constantly, repeating the same lines over and over. "They don't respect me. They're trying to ruin my life. I am done with them." As Sarmiento's frustration grew, it hardened into planning. The evening of February 15th was heavy with tension. Carlos and Felicia confronted Sarmiento again about his behavior. Witnesses later said he felt humiliated, as though every problem in his life had been placed at his feet by the Cancels. Around 9 o'clock that night, the argument erupted. Carlos demanded that Sarmiento leave the house immediately. Felicia stood behind her husband, firm, steady, and clear. For most young men, this would have ended with a slammed door and a long walk home to cool off. But Sarmiento was not thinking logically. He was angry, embarrassed, and spiraling. Instead of walking away, he reached for a gun he had access to. And instead of leaving the house, he walked back inside. Sarmiento targeted Carlos first. He fired multiple rounds at close range. Carlos collapsed near the entrance of the home and died almost instantly. Felicia screamed and ran toward the kitchen, maybe toward the phone, maybe toward the back door, but she didn't make it far. Sarmiento chased her through the house and shot her several times. It was a killing fueled by anger, resentment, and a burning feeling. Investigators later noted the bullet patterns. There was no hesitation, no warning, no break between the shots. It was direct, cold, and deeply personal. Within seconds, both Carlos and Felicia were gone. Their daughter was inside the home at the time, whether during or immediately after the shots. Terrified, she called 911. But by the time paramedics arrived, both parents were already dead. Panicked, Sarmiento fled the house on foot. When police arrived minutes later, they walked into a scene of chaos. The parents' bodies, shell casings, scattered across the floor. Blood patterns that clearly showed close-range firing. It didn't look like a robbery. It didn't look random. It was intimate, deliberate. Through tears, their daughter identified the shooter immediately. A statewide alert was issued. Officers began questioning friends, and every conversation led to the same truth. Sarmiento had been angry, unstable, and openly hostile toward the Cancels. Some said they feared he would do something stupid. By the next morning, police used phone pings, witness reports, and accounts from friends who saw him fleeing to track him down. He didn't resist when officers finally caught up to him. Sarmiento was taken to court and he was found guilty on multiple counts of first-degree murder. His sentence ensured he would spend the rest of his life in prison. Oscar Pistorius was born on the 22nd of November 1986 in Johannesburg, South Africa. Because of a congenital condition, he was born without fibulas, and with feet that weren't fully formed. Both his legs were amputated below the knee when he was an infant. Rather than letting this stop him, he learned to walk and eventually run using prosthetic legs, later upgraded to carbon fiber blades. Pistorius became one of the most famous Paralympic athletes in the world. He competed in sprint events, 100 meters, 200 meters, 400 meters in the T43 and T4 for a disability class, and achieved major success, including multiple Paralympic gold medals. Reeva Steenkamp was a South African model, law graduate, and media personality. She had begun to build a public presence, appearing on reality TV and modeling projects. She was 29 years old at the time of her death. Oscar and Reeva met in 2012 in the circles of South Africa's celebrity and media world. Their relationship lasted only a few months before the fatal incident. On the evening of the 13th of February 2013, the couple spent a quiet evening together. Pistorius' home in a gated, secure estate in Pretoria. According to public records, there was no reported disturbance or major conflict that night. In the early hours of the 14th of February 2013, around 3 a.m., a gunshot fired inside Pistorius' home changed everything. Pistorius' account. He claimed that he heard noises from the bathroom, believed an intruder had gained entry, and fearing for safety, he retrieved his licensed 9mm pistol and fired through a locked toilet door. He said he never realized his girlfriend, Reeva Steenkamp, was behind the door. The fatal result, Reeva Steenkamp was struck by multiple bullets and died. The shooting, 4 shots fired through the door, triggered immediate police response, investigation, and eventually arrest. Pistorius was arrested and charged with murder. In March 2014, during the high-profile trial, Oscar Pistorius argued he mistook Reeva for an intruder. He claimed fear and panic as justification. The prosecution countered. They argued the killing was intentional, suggesting Reeva had fled to the bathroom during a fight, and Pistorius fired knowing she was inside. The judge ruled Pistorius not guilty of murder, but convicted him of culpable homicide, similar to manslaughter, concluding he had acted recklessly by firing through a closed door. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison. But in 2015, prosecutors appealed the verdict, arguing the initial sentencing was too lenient and that the judge misapplied the law. In December 2015, the Supreme Court of Appeal overturned the culpable homicide conviction and instead found Pistorius guilty of murder under the doctrine of dolus eventualis, meaning the court judged that Pistorius should have foreseen that firing multiple shots through a closed door could kill someone inside. In 2016, Pistorius was resentenced to 6 years in prison. But in 2017, the sentence was increased after prosecutors argued the original 6-year sentence was shockingly lenient. The new sentence became 13 years and 5 months. Oscar and Reeva spent the night together, so did he see her on the bed, or did he forget?